Because of time and the amount of information I know that we want to get through, and I'm pretty certain we're probably going to have quite a few questions as well. We'll get going on this. Welcome to our Understanding Recent CMMC Changes webinar. We want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. We've been calling this the white elephant in the room, or elephant in the room. I just put two things together there. A white elephant is a Christmas thing that you do with
I
gifts,
was
and
very
then an
excited about
elephant.
the gifts
You
for a
were
second.
okay. You
Yeah.
thought I was
Yeah.
well. This is a gift. The gift is you, John and Kathy being in the room for everybody today. So that's the gift, Jeff. So see, I can pull it together if I need to. Just yeah, takes a little bit to wrap around it, but we did want to bring everybody together. And explain, we're bringing the experts into the room. We always at MassMEP, we find ways to have partnerships with the experts on these subject matters. And that's why we have Kathy, John, and Jeff in the space with you all today to answer these questions. I know that John will be the first one to say there might be some of you in here that maybe aren't working with Synagex, and that you might be working with other CMMC providers. I don't, do you call it a provider? What would you call that?
Yeah. Provider
A
makes sense.
provider? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you might be working with somebody else, and hopefully you're asking the same questions of them as well. If you aren't working with Synagex, it's just we have been working with the Synagex team. We work with another team as well, on on the other side of the state. We like to, but yet now we're starting to see everybody kind of cross over because of what's happening. So we would say, if you are working with someone else, make sure you're checking in and asking these questions as well. For today, for housekeeping purposes in the webinar, you have the chat option available to you on the bottom, and then we also have the Q&A. If you can't see it, if your bar is really small, there's a more button that has three dots in it. If you click that, you'll see the Q&A in there. We usually recommend using the chat if you want to reach out to one of our facilitators directly. So if you have something direct that you want to ask John, Kathy, or Jeff, reach out to them or myself for Mass MEP. Go ahead and pop that into the chat. But we always recommend anybody that does have a question use the Q&A. More than likely, you're not the only one in the space that probably has a similar question, has that question. So the more we can get these questions out there, the more we can get engaged with this conversation. So I'm going to turn it over I will introduce Jeff though. We kind of thrown Jeff in here. He's a pinch hitter for today with us. We had him planned and scheduled to come in, and he agreed to. And then his life likes to take a course of its own and grab a hold of him and say, "Hold on, slow down a little bit, Jeff."
Yeah.
So Jeff Brandt is the director of the MA Apex that we have here in Massachusetts. So that is why Jeff is here. And then I'm going to turn it over to John so he can do the introductions for himself and for Kathy, because now I want to test you to see if you can pronounce her name the right way.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks very much. Thank you, Jeff and Haley, for having us. We always love Haley. I think it's actually been a little while since we've gotten to do one of these together, so I can't tell you how excited I am. This is going to be great. Um, I'm hopeful that throughout this webinar we can make it interactive. But I'll start by introducing ourselves and pronouncing Kathy's name. I'm John. I am the founder and CEO of Synagex. As Haley mentioned, we are a managed service provider in Massachusetts that is focused in the defense industrial base. We are what's referred to as an RPO. So we are I guess you'd say certified or accredited by the powers that be to be the good guy auditors for manufacturers. For the purposes of today, obviously, we just want to be helpful. I know there's a lot of questions, and so we really want to do the best we can to answer what we know and to have those fun conversations with you. I'm joined today by Kathy Oleschlager, who is our Vice President of Information Security and also carries all of the heavy weight when it comes to the certification acronyms in CMMC. She leads our consulting practice for gap assessment work and really is the detailed subject matter expert here. I'm just bag of hot air. Um, so if you don't mind, I guess we'll kick things off. The topic of the day, or the white elephant in the room. What's going on with CMMC? Um, yeah, Kathy, I'll leave it to you after this to kind of talk through CMMC purposes. You do a much better job at that.
Yeah.
But I guess I kind of want to start with just sort of that big question is what's going on. Um, I think we could fill 3 hours with speculation on sort of what's going to happen here, right? Just this morning, I don't know if anybody else has thought of this, but just this morning, I used AI and asked the question, right? I use it for just about everything, but for some reason, I never asked it this question. What do you think? And it did a really cool job of giving me all these like probabilities of outcomes and pretty interesting stuff. But I think when you think about this problem, that's really what it is, right? It's an opinion, whether you're asking a machine or a person. We're not going to know exactly what this outcome is, but it's it's likely, right? It's highly likely that it's not going to be a major deviation, right? And when we think about it, just to kind of dive right into it, we try to, in these moments, because there's been multiple, remember, this has been reformed and I won't say paused, but changed a few times now since
Yeah.
2019. But every one of these has the same focus, right? And really the focus here is national defense and protecting our country, right? And defending it from a threat that's not traditional warfighting methods. And I think you could argue to some degree, our country might have some catching up to do in regards to that cyber element, right? And maybe even in the way that we manufacture and the speed to sort of action. Um, when we think about CMMC and NIST and sort of the purpose for all of this, it really boils down to the protection of our warfighters. Um, and I guess if you put yourself in that seat, pretty kind of interesting exercise, right? If you were to say, or if you were in a position to solve that problem for the country, how would you do that? Thinking about that entire landscape, thinking about your role today in that landscape, right? And the number of people that are in those similar roles, thinking about the prime manufacturers here, right? And thinking about how they have to put how much effort they have to put in, how they balance that with things like profitability, right? How do you solve this problem? How do you get the country to a better place to protect our warfighters? And that's a pretty interesting way to think about it. Kathy, do you mind flipping to the next one? So I guess just to give you a lens on another lens on this. So Kathy and I were talking about, what are we going to show today that's going to be interesting and kind of fuel this conversation? And one of the things we thought about was, well, we do hundreds of these assessments, and we worked with all sorts of businesses, established, new, but all in the defense industrial base. And obviously, the systems that we use have some data. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to kind of see or to show folks what we see, right? If we were to aggregate some data in an anonymous fashion and kind of just demonstrate what we see, and using that lens of if we were responsible for solving this problem, what would we do? What we are showing you here, the sort of middle part of this graph, that little oddly shaped blob in the middle in light blue, that is this year's average assessment compliance in comparison to the whole, which is a 110, right? Which is full compliance. And so this is a really interesting way to visualize that problem. If as a country, our warfighters' security is dependent upon what we do, this is what we see the average compliance is based on self-attestation, right? Because that's something that's existed for a little while, right? We've all kind of either said that we're in compliance to get by the current sort of interpretation of regulation at some point, or we have a plan, and this is sort of the state of where we are today. regardless of where this lands, we need to get here, right? We need to get there. And the enforcement and the cost of it is really the challenge, that I think needs to be solved. And that's an important thing to think about. I think the way we see it is, regardless of how that happens, this is a huge risk to our country and it's a huge risk to your business. So to kind of talk about that a little bit, I know Kathy has some detail prepared, but I guess I'm curious, Jeff, Haley, do you guys have any thoughts around that before we dive into some detail?
No, not at the moment. I think as we kind of get more into the questions and answers and things like that, I'd be able to kind of jump in a little bit more and give more of my thought. The problem with us over here with Apex is that we are going to be very surface level. I would say from our clients and the conversations we had in regards to CMMC, it's either I don't even know where to start,
Yeah.
or they're at a certain spot and they're unsure of what they should be doing next. The I think the jump from understanding this is a thing we need to do, whether it's level one or level two, and how to connect the dots to getting that help in the
Yeah.
best way possible is I think where the gap is, at least for us with, being on the grassroots. Because we can only go so far. I could say level one, this many controls, these are what they are, here you go, right? But as for kind of jumping into that next level and making sure that they are compliant, has been hard for us. And then also, you have a lot of legacy companies in Massachusetts who have been doing work with primes for 40, 50, 60 years, and they are not compliant.
Yeah.
So they're thinking that the reliance on them for that GD or EB or whomever it is, it's going to be okay because we've been making this same part or doing this same service for them for 40 years. But it's probably going to go away eventually once the hammer comes down and it becomes more strict, depending on, what happens in the next going into September. But I think that's kind of where we sit now on our side. It's just kind of, you know, uh, bringing everybody down a little bit, kind of
Yeah.
hand holding them into certain situations and saying, hey, if you're wherever you are, beginning, in the middle, or you were doing a gap analysis, whatever it is, continue to do so. Set yourself up for success because cybersecurity is still here. It's,
Yeah.
it's still in contracts. Only one thing has changed. And
That's exactly right. I guess what we're going to try to do today is just try to approach it from all angles. We believe the same thing, right? And I guess what we've heard is a whole, and I'm sure you have too, Jeff, right? A lot of different perspectives. Yeah, there's this commitment. We need to get there. I just need to know some actionable chunks. We have unfortunately heard some folks that said, oh, this might go away, right? And I think the end message here is, yeah, I think we should be looking at this as an opportunity to get in
mhm.
accelerate, this effort or to find the resources and paths. But if I guess if you're one of those who have said, that this could go away, right? I guess what we're trying to say is like I wouldn't count on that. Is it a possibility? I think ChatGPT told me it's like a 0.05% possibility that it goes away. But our perspective here is it's not dead. But
Yeah.
let's attack it from a few angles.
Yeah. So the big picture is that if you want to do business with the government, you have to protect governmental data. That's kind of the bottom line of this point. In the last graph, the most striking weakness that I noticed was a lack of incident response readiness. And the DFARS clause that ends with 7012, which is in most contracts already and enforced and in place. And, it is a requirement that that rule for the defense industrial base was all about safeguarding covered defense information, but also being able to report incidents within 72 hours if it was affecting covered defense information. So that is a requirement that has been in place for many years already, and it will continue to be a requirement from a NIST framework perspective. But it is a noticeable gap that my fear is that is going to affect us one way or another, whether there is CMMC, whether there is an enforcement through C3POs or not. So I kind of want to put that out there that from a federal level, you have your federal acquisition rules that say you have to protect CUI, you have to protect federal contract information. How you do that is through the implementation of the NIST 800-171 revision 2, while the federal acquisition rule is already looking at revision 3. The defense industrial base, DFARS, is still revision 2. So basically, the requirements are not changing. You have to be compliant, you have to implement all these controls, and you have to be able to report an incident, because the fact is it's a matter of when, not if, that we are being targeted. All of us, including everybody on this call presenting, we are part of this ecosystem, and we're equally sharing this big target on our backs, because we're all connected. So right now, the big picture is, yes, they're reevaluating phase 2 because of what people think is maybe a high cost, but really it is about $40,000 every 3 years for a certification assessment, on average for a small manufacturing company. It shouldn't be more than that. So that's kind of the argument is, let's revisit the cost, the burden, but at the same time, the idea that enforcement is necessary is not going to go away. Enforcement is still applicable today with phase 1. So self-assessments is still a requirement, and the ability to actually receive and be awarded a contract still hinges on you being compliant and having self-assessed. So that doesn't go away. So why was there the suspension to begin with? This has happened before. It's just because whenever you have changes in government, you may need someone to revisit what they just signed up for. So the DOW's CIO is fairly new in her role, so she needed to review, is this still the right approach? Is there a need to revisit things? So it's been done before. A task force is evaluating what the program looks like today. They requested information, and depending on what the inputs are, they'll come up with a decision to determine what does the future looks like for CMMC. But at the bottom line is that nothing really is changing in terms of the need to protect the data given to you to do the work for the government.
Yeah.
So did you want to interject there, Jeff?
Yeah, I was saying, like, the way that I kind of explain it to clients is that the CMMC was the certification process to show that your cybersecurity is up to snuff, right? Like you were saying, Kathy, everything before that, all the clauses and the FAR and the DFARs and all that stuff is still applicable. That's all I wanted to add in there.
Yep. Also worth noting is that the accountability is not going to go away. You still have to self-assess, but also depending on how important your role is within this ecosystem, the DIPCAC, so the Defense Industrial Base CMMC assessment organization. So they are part of the DCMA. They can still come knocking on your door and basically run an assessment, ensuring that you are compliant. So, and if you've self-assessed and you said that you claimed to be perfectly compliant and then they find you not compliant, you're still liable to potentially be litigated by the Department of justice for False Claims Act. So there's still that risk that you have to be truthful in this process. You can't just state that you're compliant while you're not. And that is also why CMMC exists. It's to build this ecosystem of organizations and people who can actually consult and certify that things are actually implemented correctly. Because it is a little bit difficult to sometimes understand what exactly do they want us to do. So that's why people and organizations have to go through a very rigorous process to be educated and be able to consult and assess. And again, the contractual enforcement isn't going away. So your clients can still determine whether or not to go into business with you or continue doing business with you, depending on where you stand with your self-assessment. So this
Kathy,
is just a
we got a couple of good questions here, if you don't mind. I'm just going
ooh,
to
let's go.
interject for them. Yeah.
Yes.
So one question here is, does this apply to suppliers, tier three, to government contractors, not subs, but suppliers who are issued POs from the subcontractors for a DoD contract in the textiles industry?
So CMMC or the DFARS clause really is all about protecting a type of data. So controlled, unclassified information, or to a lesser degree, federal contract information. So if you are not receiving that kind of data, then you don't necessarily have to, unless contractually you're being told to implement the DFARS clause, whether or not you handle CUI. So it kind of is still up to the client to determine if that's a necessity or not for you. You know, keep in mind, it's all about protecting the supply chain. You don't want to be that back door that causes a major breach within your client. That's kind of the point of this all.
Great answer. I like that. Yeah, I like to think of it a lot like vendor risk management, right? The customers have to manage their risk. We have frameworks, and sure, they have some discretion as to sort of what risk appetite they're comfortable with. Great answer.
I think,
So go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
I'm going to add. I think as well, something to think about that as you are tier three, right? Is understanding if this is a straight purchase order, from a subcontractor, or is it a formal sub agreement? Because the flow down requirements is going to be made by the prime, right? Whoever owns that contract. So if any type of drawings or flow down comes to you that you have to abide by in order to create or that product or do that service, then you will have to adhere to the level 1 or level 2, depending on what it is that you're getting in. So that's more of we have to sit down and figure out what that contract's giving you and seeing if it's required, and then also communicating back to the prime, your thoughts.
Yep, great point. We do have one other question, Kathy. The question is, where do I report a self-assessment score?
What was the first part?
How and where do I report a self-assessment score?
Oh, so that's a good question. So the SPURS system is where you can self-assess and self-attest. Your affirming official, basically the owner of the company or the president, has to kind of vouch that, that the statements made are accurate and complete. So the SPURS system is the tool where you self-assess. In this slide deck that you will receive a copy from are resources on how to do all the self-assessment stuff. So there are resources to the SPURS system.
And then also on the Apex side, if you are a client of ours or become a client, we'll be able to give you, we have the SPURS score walkthrough that actually has screenshots, because it is a longer process than most realize, so that we can help you out there as well.
Yeah, take the help.
Awesome.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Great. So we wanted to kind of make this about you guys, about your business, right? So what is it to you? So there are risks of not implementing these security controls, because that's really the point of it all, right? Protecting the data, protecting your company. So the first risk is that you may not continue to receive the revenue that you're getting today from the primes or even their contractors. If they start to come contract renewal time, or if you want to grow your business throughout this ecosystem, then they may still require you to self-assess and be compliant, and really tie the award of the contract to that compliance. So even though phase two is paused, your ability to grow your business, continue to gain that revenue that you make today within the defense industrial base is still at risk. The second part is I talked a little bit about the liability of, claiming to be compliant, but being not compliant. And that may be
Nobody
something that,
nobody does that. Nobody does that. It's always
well, it has happened. And
I'm
sometimes
joking.
it's just because organizations, they read the small piece, they don't read all the bullets and all the context, and they think they are actually compliant. But, then when the DIPCAT comes in, turns out that they're not, that's when the DOJ starts to take action. So it is happening where like serious fines are being issued to organizations because of this. So this is an example where a company out of Alabama got caught. So that enforcement mechanism still exists.
Yeah, all kidding aside, I drive Kathy nuts. I realize maybe not everybody on the call knows that, but I like to drive Kathy nuts. Um, yeah, I think we've seen some real world examples of that. Even, some of our clients, have historically self-attested to a score. Maybe they did the best they could with the knowledge they had. Hadn't engaged a third party. It's been in contracts for some time to self-attest. Maybe they felt like it, but we have seen examples, real world examples of DIBCAC audits, and it shows up as like an email with a 3 to 4 week notice that an auditor is coming, and you better be ready. And it was an exercise in the last case that we heard that took a month to execute, and resulted in some very painful changes. Luckily, there were some things already implemented, and so there was a path defined. But yeah, I don't think anybody wants to go through that. It is a very real risk.
And then just looking from a cyber risk perspective, we use a GRC tool that can help us determine the cybersecurity risks by industry and company size. So we kind of did a little exercise to see what that looks like for manufacturing with a size of 50 people, 15 million annual revenue. And we pulled the data that was historical cybersecurity incident related data. So this actually happened. And this kind of shows you how, for that kind of a tranche of organizations, what in reality has happened and what kind of risks these are. Now, this is just kind of showing what's in red and yellow and green, but then the bubble chart here kind of shows you how ransomware and malicious insider, which are very prevalent threats. Malicious insider is a big threat, also especially a concern in the defense industrial base. And that kind of shows you how just one incident can be the end of a company's business, right? It can be really destructive in nature because all your hardware is gone, but now you're being litigated. Just the cost of having to deal with the aftermath can be very devastating. So this is just the through the lens of cybersecurity within manufacturing. The cost of an incident can be astronomical, even
You
to a
know,
small business.
I think, all right, I hope at this point there's a lot more awareness around this, but you never know. We do also serve folks that aren't in manufacturing, and Kathy's absolutely right. Everyone's a target, and it really only takes an email compromise or a piece of ransomware to just start a very bad situation. And so another way to think about all of this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. I've heard this a lot in the industry, but it's a risk, and this framework is really just a framework to protect your business. There's a focus on CUI, obviously, when it comes to compliance, but these really are things that every business should be aware of. We've had clients outside of the manufacturing industry actually ask us to do 800 171 assessments for them and just replace CUI with asset XYZ, just to help them feel protected from those threats. Very real things. We've seen millions of dollars fly out the door, because of security gaps in all sorts of businesses, and it's a pretty scary thing.
And the cyber threat is not going away. It's only amplifying, but it's also becoming more destructive in nature. Some of it was about financial gains, right? The ransomware attacks of the world, many of them driven by Russia. But China is obviously out to get all your intellectual property, recreate all your work for a lower cost, and then outbid you at the end of the day. But now with the Iran conflict, they are way more destructive in their approach. Our critical infrastructure, we've heard recent events happening within our water supply being affected by these cyber attacks. That's just one little thing that we're seeing. All the things that are happening without us, not our knowledge, without it being on the news, you know, will have this massive effect on us collectively. So look at, the defense industrial base being part of the critical infrastructure that is being targeted, not just for financial gains anymore, but not just for espionage, but also for destruction purposes. Are there any other questions before we all right, we'll keep moving.
Yeah,
So
no.
again, this is supposed to help you. So CMMC, yes, it's an enforcement mechanism because honestly, if there wasn't an enforcement, nobody is doing it. That's just a lesson learned from the past years. But you really have to put it in perspective to you, your business, and understand that this is going to affect whether or not it's enforced through certifications. It will affect the bottom line of your business. Do you want to grow within this ecosystem or not? That's really the question. But also keep in mind that the protection of CUI is a federal mandate. So that will, you implementing this NIST framework will help you to also expand above and beyond that particular ecosystem. So across all federal agencies, this will become more and more of a requirement to do business with the government. But also, the focus is very much on CUI, but you should be focused on your business operations, on being able to protect your business from all threats in foreign and domestic. Even that insider threat is something that you need to be mindful of. And that is really what this framework is meant to accomplish, is to protect your business at all levels in different layers, whether it's physical protection, personnel protection. There are so many different ways to look at it, but it really wants you to protect your business from the top down. Make sure that people, process, and systems are being secured across the board. Not just that CUI workflow. Yes, that's what CMMC and DFARS is all about, but really that's what we want you to do is protect your business. And also be prepared for that security incident. You will be targeted, you will get some type of an incident. So have a plan, test it, it's one of those major requirements. It's a -5 score if you fail that one, but it's actually not that hard to do. And then just avoid the litigation, manage expectations with your clients. But keep in mind that change is constant, the technology is changing. We're not even talking about AI. I mean, John mentioned it a little bit, but the AI element to the threat landscape is going to make it even harder for us to protect ourselves. So this is the bar, this is the low bar. So hopefully you know, take our word for it in terms of, we care about your business. We want you to be sustainable, be resilient, and no matter what happens in the future.
I know you guys, so there is a question in here. It's a great question from Kim with Blue IQ. Before we get to that part of it, I think if we go back to one of the biggest questions is always going to be the financial side of it, correct? So I know there's always the statement that we say that it could cost you more if you don't have it versus costing you what you would pay to get it, in the end result. Um, are there ways or are there things coming, and this could be either of you, any of you, Jeff, you might even have some insights onto these as well, is we obviously at a state level are now at a point where the state is seeing this as cost of doing business, right? So there's not a lot of funding that's coming through anymore
Mhm.
for this. And understood as to why they're making those changes and those adjustments, but we are hearing it's costly. It is an expensive piece to put into place. Are we hearing anything? Are we potentially knowing? Is there something that could be coming down? Maybe it's from a federal level as to some I wouldn't say there's going to be cost reductions on this, but maybe there is some supplementary funding that's going to be available for this. And then, like, and I'm asking this because I see in this question, one of the pieces in the question is kind of like a budget as well. Like, where does this fall in that scope? So that's kind of a two-piece question there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Jeff.
yeah, I meant for me, as once the suspension happened and everything is being pushed until September, I haven't really heard of anything of trying to help,
Mm,
monetarily wise. The biggest thing that we can do right now is if you are touching CMMC or cybersecurity or anything like that, or you're trying to get into it and it's so overwhelming, you don't know where to start. The government doesn't know that, right? So there's an RFI that's out right now that you can put comments in. I'll put it in the chat. It's different from a like an RFI through SAM. I think you have to just put your comments in with a subject line and send it out to two emails. I believe, is that right, John and Kathy? Have you heard of that? And then you get to let
Mhm.
them know. You let them know exactly how you feel about CMMC because they're going to take all those comments and that's where they're going to come up with what they're going to be, whatever it is they come up with. But at least we're putting our best foot forward and saying there's real problems here. We either need help or a better way to get this help or get through CMMC level two. Um, so that'll help. And then also, Kim, on the step by step to CMMC level two, I'll put this in there as well, but the DoD CIO website has a level two self-assessment guide. And I think it's a really good place to kind of start off at because, I preach, doing this in manageable chunks. Maybe there's some things that you and your IT team, if you have one, can start doing to adhere. And then once you kind of get to places of unknown or you have no idea what to do, that's when you start reaching out and trying to get, that assessment done or that gap assessment and working on from there. So perfect. Never mind. I don't think I need the Kathy,
The
you're so
I
links.
got you,
awesome.
Jeff.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I,
But yes,
sorry, Jeff. Our perspective on I guess the question, right, and trying to sort of bring it down to, business owners' perspective. It's so variable, right? The amount of the types of business, where you are in your journey. There's startups, right? One or two employees. There's There's businesses that have been around for decades, transitioning, to family that have done nothing with IT. There's businesses that have family doing IT, right?
Mhm.
There are businesses that are mature with their IT, but very confused about cybersecurity and compliance. So I guess when you think about sort of the challenge posed, what is a practical, sort of very easy way, all of those variables make it very difficult to have like a playbook, right? A very simple, like, here's a one pager on what you can do. And to us, it's really always come down to, finding partnership, finding the resources and partnerships that will do that for you, right? Because that compliance itself is necessary. It's not directly revenue generating. You can make the same argument for IT, right? We know we're an expense. Um, but so how do you take these things and, make it so that as business leaders, you can consume it, right?
Mhm.
So that you can make it actionable chunks. It's personal, right? And so these resources help you do that. They help you frame those things up. But to me, the faster path is always, if you can, you need to find some partnership to help you do that. And unfortunately, it's just not standard. There's obviously some frames to think about that, but understanding your business, translating the control sets, having acumen that's not driven, by total profit, in IT. Those are things that are critical. And if you have to piece it together, there are ways to do that, right? But those things are really kind of your shortcut through it all. You need to have those resources and partnerships. And I know it's a big part of what this whole panel, tries to preach, and really about every
Mhm.
one of these webinars is find the right partnership arrangement.
Mhm.
And I would add to it to just document what your CUI flow would look like. Like you receive it, what do you have to do with it? Do you have to print it? Does it have to go on a USB drive so that you can configure, put some programs onto machinery? Or can it just remain within a virtual enclave? So the, the the need to use that CUI in different applications kind of drives how that CUI is protected downstream. If you can keep it in a virtual enclave that is FedRAMP moderate, authorized, or equivalent, there are plenty of partners out there to support that. That is ideal because they
Mhm.
take care of all the bells and whistles. You still have to do certain things. It's not, there's no easy button. I'm not trying to sell that idea, but it does help reduce that burden on you as an organization, as a startup for sure. But having that idea of where is it going to go, how will we use it, if even we're receiving CUI, a virtual enclave solution, I think would be really helpful to consider. Again, document that workflow and then start determining how to protect that data, whatever form it becomes available at.
Hope that answered the question. I wish it was a
Yeah.
simpler answer. And as far as money is concerned, another thing I know this panel is passionate about, we've all been fighting for some time to try to create more opportunities. There's things happening all the time, statewide, federally. There's nothing crystal clear that we could point to today to say, hey, go do this, aside from the great services that are being offered by MassMEP currently.
Mhm.
Um, but as far as sort of getting there and remediation, yeah, I've heard lots of rumors of some new opportunities, but nothing we can point to that's actionable today.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the key things, like you just said there, John, which so another question comes in that we talked about it the other day, was a lot of, it's been coming up a lot, is the not full clarity on what's happening, where it's coming from, what do I listen to, what do I don't listen to. So the question is, if I ask five people to find CUI and I get five different answers, how far down the rabbit hole should I go?
What an awesome question.
Stop right there, Alice. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll hopefully this will be meaningful, but it's risk management. Risk management concepts aren't black and white. It would be great if we could say, this is what it is, and I'm hoping folks are working hard to continue to clarify the definition of CUI. Until then, think about it in terms of risk. If it's unclear to you,
Mm.
how do you put some boundary around it to do the right thing for our country and to do the right thing, in regard to the sensitivity of that information? Obviously, people will have different perspectives of that.
Yeah.
I'm conservative. I come from banking. I would treat everything if it were any sort of a question like it is.
Yep.
But I do realize that can,
Yeah.
that can have cost impact. It can have work impact.
I think some things to kind of think about when you're trying to differentiate from FCI to CUI, right? Is I usually think of FCI in like purchase orders, statement of work, invoice, things that are tied to a federal contract, nothing that asks you or to make anything or do anything outside of whatever the scope of work. When you're talking about CUI, we're talking about tech drawings, specs, personal identity, PII, right? Unclassed information, just things like that. Like John, like we were saying, if you get a funny feeling in your stomach after those things, you should probably just ask the question. If you're attached to a contract, there's point of contacts you can ask and say, what is this material? Where does it stand before I make a decision on it? You're never alone in it, but you have to know where to look and who to contact, right? So if you make those decisions first and say, hey, I don't know if this is FCI or CUI, I'm attached to this contract. I want to make sure what I'm going. That's what a contracting officer is supposed to answer those questions, or a contracting representative. That's part of their job. So always pay attention in those contracts to the point of contacts, because they will help you out but they can only help you out if you let them know. Closed mouths don't get fed. So
Yep.
Great questions. So
Right.
from here, here's we have another question.
Yeah.
I guess well, let's dive into the question. I do want to talk a little bit, I guess, about how we're approaching it. This isn't part of the slide deck, but we've also gotten a lot of questions from an ESP or MSP, questions, and as we're picking partners, sort of how are we approaching the change or the suspension, and what does that mean, for maybe IT service providers that some other clients are using. Would love to talk about that a little bit, but Kim's got a question.
Yeah, so she says, from the perspective of a Massachusetts-based startup and small business, we understand that TABA funding may be available to SBIR, STTR awardees for certain CMMC related cybersecurity assistance. Is MassMEP or Mass Apex aware of any other federal grants or funding programs that Massachusetts startups and small businesses can access to help offset the cost of preparing for and achieving CMMC level 2 compliance? Jeff.
So I can start off with that. So
Yeah.
TABA is very specific to the agency, right? So for those who don't know, it's basically like a stipend, right? So NIH, for example, runs a $6,500 TABA for phase one and a $50,000 for phase two. And what that can do is you can use that for anything that's outside of the research and development that you're doing within those SBIRs. So if you want to put it towards CMMC, you could, because that's outside of what you originally got the grant for. I haven't seen anything. I think I'll have to double check, but I think Mass Ventures might be having something with a START program. Haley, have you heard of that?
I rumblings, but I haven't.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
gonna.
yeah.
Kim, me and you are meeting soon, anyways, in like an hour, so we could talk more into it. We are. We'll talk more about it there. But I'm as of right now, I never want to put anything out that's not fully solid and hasn't been vetted by myself and everyone up here before I put it out. But I did want to at least let everybody else know about TABA, and that if they're in the SBIR space, that's a real thing. But you have to read the contract. the solicitation of the grant, because not all grants are going to have TABA funding.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and the positive thing about, what Jeff can do is for anybody on this call, like, so there, anybody in here can reach out to Jeff and can talk to Jeff about, you can go on, I put the websites in the chat. So if you go on his website and then you can click set up, I think is it set up an appointment or contact a contractor? How do you have it listed on your website, Jeff?
It's it's like I'll put I'll put the email in here for
Yeah,
contact.
it's like a,
It's a
yeah.
lot easier
So
right now.
yeah, so you can reach out to him, but there are all of the everybody needs to have their, I'll use a cybersecurity term, their hygiene done properly, correct? So in order for you to either qualify for TABA, SBIR, STTR, they have a hygiene checklist that you have to, so Jeff can walk you through those pieces, him and his team, that's what they do. And if you are in an organization that has anybody, there's an Apex that operates in every state, similar to what the MEP centers do too. So if that's something like, if these are never heard of these before, don't know what TABA is, don't know what SBIR, STTR is, this is where we come into play. This is kind of where our role is as the resources to reach out and ask us. And then we can kind of help you go through the checklist to make sure you have those pieces that you need to be able to go into those steps. So it isn't something where that's their own form of, I'll call their certification process, their own CMMC that they have themselves inside of their organization, so that everybody can, they make sure that the money that they're handing out qualifies, goes to the right qualified candidates. All right, John, we've got about 7 minutes.
Oh, so keep it brief. All right, fine.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
It's tough. It's gonna
uh,
be tough for you, but let's see if we can do it.
Yeah, I thought it might be interesting to talk about. We've obviously we've been working with a number of folks, and we've gotten some questions about the delineation with ESP versus what MSPs do and how CMMC affects our world. And I'd say over the years, our stance has changed, and I think the guidance has changed as well,
Yeah.
just like everyone else, right? But so today we actually had signed up ourselves for C3PAO assessment. I, I think it's right around now. We were supposed to be assessed, right, or in a couple weeks. Our mocks are coming up in a couple weeks, and I think the real thing we had scheduled, and we've made the difficult decision to kind of, I guess, just delay the assessment. We are still feeling very strongly, even before we hear how this ends up, that regardless of what we have to do, that's something that Synagex is going to do. Obviously, with any sort of ambiguity, we just kind of want to hear what those rules are, or see what they're going to look like before we fully sort of commit to it. But I think the interesting conversations come around how that affects manufacturers, right? Everyone's working with different types of IT service providers and internal resources. And as they are thinking about assessments themselves, how does that relationship impact them? And, I think the position that we've taken is as an IT service provider who thrives on standards, right, which many do, the tools that are used, the processes that are put in place, the way that things are secured to demonstrate compliance, and how that impacts clients. If we can achieve certification with those being used ourselves, it really kind of changes the scope of an engagement for a client, right? If it's okay here, right? Ideally, it's harder to prove that it's not okay for a client, right? So if you were to take even half of that assessment and say it's already been blessed and it's deployed in the exact same way, right? Then hypothetically, in the room with that auditor, it's really going to be an interesting conversation to say it works here and it doesn't work at the client. And so we've really encouraged a lot of the clients that we work with regularly to kind of, if we can, wait until our own certification is done to help with that conversation, and might be something that's worth exploring with your IT service providers or your internal folks. Because I think when that conversation happens, when it comes, it's really this, right? We're talking about risk. People are going to have different perceptions on risk. You want to have your stuff together, but there's going to be some argument on some points. Any audit I've been in audits most of my career through banking and through work in defense, and there's going to be some arguments, right? Healthy debates as to whether or not a risk is contained, it's handled in a way that's responsible, and an auditor says a control is met, right, or a risk is mitigated. And in those conversations, we think it'd be really helpful, for whoever your IT service provider is to have some confidence. It might be worth talking to them about their path for certification.
All right, well
So
done. 4 minutes.
yeah, I tried, and I guess I was hopeful there would be some questions around MSP business, but I understand if we're not as passionate about it as we are. That's,
Yeah.
we love doing it.
I think at this point, there's like people are like, they have just said about 50 acronyms in about 8 minutes, and I have no
Yeah.
idea what any of them are. Everybody's like doing this right now. What's an MSP?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's it's listen,
It's the world we
we
live
do it
in.
all the time. Yeah, we do it all the time. Like we get into
Yeah.
those places and we know, but no. So hopefully this was provided more clarity to people. I think the long and short of it is whatever you were doing before, just keep doing. If
Right.
we're going to make it as simple as possible, right? Don't stop what you've been doing. Keep doing what you were looking at getting to. As Kathy said, I look at it as this is, we talked about it yesterday. Somebody's new is coming in. Their name gets connected to this. They want to make sure it's going to be done the right way so that when they leave, they still look good at the end of the day. So keep moving forward. If you have any questions at all, you can reach out to any of us. I did put the websites in there. You can get in contact with us. Jeff put in his contact to us. You can always reach out to us at MassMEP as well. Most of you, I think, in the call have a BDA that you work with from MassMEP. So just say, hey, listen, I was in this webinar. First, question them as to why they weren't in here, one. And then two, say, actually, I think we do. Yeah, Christina's in here. All right, good.
Saw Christina.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, give them a hard time. That's what you're supposed to do as their client. And then yeah, just say, let's clear this up for me. I need a little bit of help. What can I do? And then we'll get you to the right where you need to go. We will make this live. We will put this on our YouTube channel, so you will be able to watch us, or if anybody needs from your organization wants to learn more. And we will be sending out the slide deck. So Kathy and John gave us permission and said, yes, you can release the slides. So we will release the slides to everybody in the audience. So thanks, guys. Thanks for taking out some of your time to be with us today, and thanks to everybody in the audience. So
Oh, my pleasure.
yeah,
Thank
hopefully,
you.
Thank you.
yeah, we'll be catching up with everybody soon, and watch out for C3POs. They're coming your way.